Hey, good people. It is Casey here, and welcome to another edition of On the Front Porch with me, Casey. And if this is your first time here, we are so excited that you found us. This is where we have conversation around all things community as it relates to Black and Brown youth in particular, but from a sociological, political, sometimes theological perspective. And really, the goal is for us to just be able to kind of get to the root of what we can do next and how we can nurture our young people and nurture our community. So I'm super excited tonight to have our guest Ayanna on, and I'm going to give her a moment to introduce herself. But before we do that, be sure to let your friends and your family know where they can find this episode, whether you are viewing it on YouTube or listening to it on your favorite podcast. Be sure to share it and send it to them so that they can also enjoy the conversation tonight. So Ayanna, will you share with folks who you are? What is it that you want them to know about you?
Hi, everybody. I'm Ayanna Carrington, and I am the CEO and founder of a small agency called Your Project Board. We operate out of the Metro Atlanta area, and basically, what we are is a capacity building agency that supports small, micro-sized businesses get organized, plug holes, and also develop programs.
Awesome, good stuff. Organization is key. I lack a lot of it. I probably could get a little further in life if I had a little bit more organization. But that's neither here nor there tonight. What inspired you to get into this work?
Oh my goodness, that is a long-winded story, but I'll try to keep it short. So I used to work in corporate America. I worked at a law firm that was predominantly male and Caucasian. No shade, no tea to them. They, of course, in those spaces, they come with all their things. And I found in particular that there wasn't an infrastructure to support the Black women attorneys that
Mm,
were there. And so, did all this research about why businesses are failing, et cetera, et cetera. And, they always talk about money and capital being one of them. And that's the truth. You're right.
mhm.
Capital does play a large part in this. But it's also, in my opinion, the type of support that people get. And people seem to forget that there is a human component to business. And it's easier to run a business and be at the top of your game if you're supported by people who understand you from
Mm,
a psychological standpoint. They understand you culturally, um,
mm,
and they also want you to succeed. And so
mhm.
I kind of left. That's another story. I kind of left and I started my agency, which was originally a virtual assistant firm. My big idea was to pair assistants with these Black women entrepreneurs. And we kind of just pivoted from there.
Okay. It reminds me of something, and I love two things you said. I'm
Hmm.
gonna start with the second thing I heard and go back to the first one because the first one's probably gonna be a little more lengthy.
Hmm.
I love the word pivot.
Hmm.
Even in the work that I do in the nonprofit that I help to lead and I co-founded, um, sometimes we get so connected to what we've always done.
Hmm.
No, we started this and we started this way and we did this, but life changes, right? The world evolves. And sometimes to make sure that you have longevity and sustainability, you have to pivot. For me, it's that idea of you don't have to move away from the vision, but the mission might change, right? The method might change, or it's the mission doesn't have to change, the method might change along the way. And so I love to hear you say that idea of pivot because I think a lot of times, particularly in our community and our culture,
Hmm.
there are a lot of things systemically and institutionally that we have no control over, right?
Yeah.
And so our lives are constantly changing. And so when we get to choose the pivot, sometimes we shy away from it because we're like, oh my gosh, here's one more thing that's changing. Like, I can't control this over here. I can't control this. And so
Hmm.
I don't want it to change. I don't want to do anything different because everything else around me, I don't have control over.
Yes, yes. And I think that there is just so much violent and abusive variables around us, specifically as Black women, specifically as a as a community, regardless of where we stand in diaspora, that we, start gripping, like you're saying, we start gripping to this thing, like, oh no, I have to keep doing this. I have to keep doing this. I have to keep doing this. And like you're saying, there's just so much happening that we feel like this is the one thing we can control.
Yep.
And in doing what I do, the control starts to seep into other things that's just completely unhealthy to us.
That's a whole other topic.
And so it's like we get to start we become these CEOs or these founders, and we're running these teams, and then we can't control things along the line. Sometimes we feel like, oh my God, things are falling apart.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It is okay to move with the way. Like, I was literally having a conversation with someone. It's okay to be malleable. It's okay to like bend. There's nothing weak about being able to bend and move and all that. That's not, going against your boundaries, right? As long as your boundaries are still in place, as long as people are respecting them, it's okay to shift.
Yeah,
and
I like
move.
that. I like that a lot. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, are you familiar with the Fearless Fund? So the one thing that I thought though, related to, and we don't have to, dig deep in it because I don't have a lot of like stats and statistics. I don't want to speak to something and I don't have all the information. But the one thing that I have learned recently is that unfortunately the company has been sued. And so one of the things that has been brought up was the idea of proximity. And that's really where I was going with it, right? I don't know the ins and outs of investors. That's not my world. I like money, but that's not my world, right? But the idea that it was started, right, with the intentionality and with the premise of being able to put women of color in particular in spaces where they usually would not have proximity. So when you talked about leaving a corporate environment where it was mostly male and white male dominated, is also the idea of, does corporate work for us in mass? Right? It's always going to be an exception to the rule, right? We're always like, we're going to have the Janice Howards of the world. We're going to have the Melody, is it Hobson? I think Hobson, right? Married to George Lucas and all of that. So we're gonna have these women who are going to always break the glass ceiling. But in mass, does corporate work for us when it really is kind of like that good old boys club, right? And you don't have the same proximity to the folks who make the decisions around hiring, moving up the ladder, putting you in position to close the deals, because a lot of it is given to people that they build relationship with. And if I'm not in proximity with you, meaning I'm not even in the bubble, bump being picked, I'm not even in the circle for you to know that I'm here to be picked. I think that sometimes we cause ourselves a lot of grief. And I'm not against corporate. I believe that we should be in all spaces because that is the only way that we're going to be able to kind of win this fixed game. So I believe we should be in all spaces. But the reality is, are we being honest with ourselves and honest with this generation that's coming behind us, right? You think about these young people who are graduating college in the next year or two, those who are just graduating a year or two, and corporate is their dream, right? They want the VP status, they want to be CEO, they want to drive nice and have the expense account. And, I get it, nothing wrong with it. But are we also ensuring that the proximity that they have to decision makers is a priority? Are we setting our children up for success by making sure that we're diversifying the networks that they're in, if that is a goal for that they have?
Ooh, you asked, this is like a multi-layers. And I was just okay, which one do I want to, kind of like you, what do I want to go with first? So going back to your point about the Fearless Fund, I know that they're being sued also. And the reason why, I have a little bit of a nervous laugh, and I also have a little bit of what I say Caribbean temper. So of course, I am not happy at all about this Fearless Fund lawsuit. I think it's ridiculous. I think over time, those of us in the diaspora have been told that we ask for handouts, and And people say things like, don't give you a fish, teach you how to fish. And here we are teaching how to fish, getting the tools to learn how to fish. And someone comes and sues one of the key players in this ecosystem. So to me, it's silly. And there's nothing else behind that other than racism, right? Like, how did you get over? How did you even find the fearless one? How did you get over here?
Exactly, right?
How did you get over here with this mess? But again, I don't have all the stats. I don't have all the data. And I also don't feel like saying too much because of how close this Atlanta ecosystem is.
Yeah.
And like like we are in a cohort together, and just the group of people in that cohort, stand and touch a lot of things.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely. No, for sure. Like from what I know of them, and like again, brought it up because of the idea of proximity, because I've been following the story and listening to the co-founders talk. And that is one of the things when people ask them, well, why is this necessary to begin with? It's because we usually don't have proximity, meaning we can't even get the deals. Right. Get the funding, get the investments, because we're not even in the room for the investors to know that these phenomenal Black owned, Black women owned, Latinx owned businesses are available for them to even consider. And so, that's why I brought it up, because I want us to talk more about it. I want us to talk about this issue around proximity. Do you find that for the businesses that you help to support, I'm just going to make the assumption that probably a majority of them are Black owned or possibly women led. Right. But do you find
we are literally 100% right now supporting Black owned businesses? Nice. And if there's one that we are, that's not, y'all, I consider you Black. Okay.
I love it.
We are.
Do they find themselves kind of in the same situation where they get to kind of a stalemate, where they're progressing and then it's like, oh, here's this wall, we got to figure out how to navigate around it for us to scale and then go to the next level? And I know that all businesses have that challenge, but I feel like Black owned businesses see it in a different way.
I want you to explain seeing it in a different way.
Yeah. So for instance, like if, I believe all businesses have to crack the marketing code, right? Whereas a business that doesn't have to worry about minority certifications, right? They don't have to worry about if somebody finds out if I'm Black, will they still patronize me, right? There's some Black owners who decide, I don't want to be the face. Like I was in a cohort with a woman who had a multi-million-dollar business. And she made it her business to not be the face of her business. Like there's nothing that you can do, like just even 1 or 2 level deep research on Google to figure out who she is. Like her personal name is not on the business, right? Like even the business is under a shell of a business, because she doesn't want her consumers to know that she is a Black woman, because she's fearful that if they do, then there's going to be a subset of folks that's going to decide they don't want to purchase from her.
That's interesting.
Right? So for her to crack the marketing code, it was like, well, I'm just going to show up like I'm any other business out here. Yes, I'm Black owned, but she doesn't lead with that. And then I see another business that's comparable to hers, where the owner is the face of it, and she's barely scratching 6 figures.
I see. So you're saying that the hindrance is people seeing it as a Black business and then saying, well, those are all great points. I've been doing this for 5 years, and like in most businesses, you start off slow unless you have like a big flush or plug of money coming from mommy or daddy or whoever, or whatever it's coming from. And I tell people, in our 5th year, we've survived off of Black people this long, right? And yes, there's a lot more growth that we can achieve, but I live a pretty okay life. It could be better.
Right. You preach it to the choir.
It could be better. But I think some of us get to walk a path of authenticity, and I have to walk that path. And I push that for my clients for a reason, because these aren't just Black businesses, these are Black businesses of impact, right? And so we want to see the fearless funds, right?
Yeah.
Because we want a little Black girl to know that this exists, especially if these are little Black girls who come from disadvantaged neighborhoods. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a Black child like me, right, where I grew up in a very small part of my life in a country where everyone around me was Black, right? I wasn't confused about the things my people could do. There wasn't, I had Black landowners around me, Black priests, Black doctors, but all of those things. I might have needed that. But there are people that I grew up with and that I went to college with that said they never saw a Black person own property. They didn't know they could go from country to country. You know what I mean? And so it's important to me that there are people who walk the line of, I have to show my face. I have to tell this story.
Yeah.
Right. And I like to think a lot of my clients also live their lives comfortably, regardless of what their choice is. I tell every single one of the clients that I work with that it's important that we lead with your story, and it's important that we show your face. So
no, I mean, I love it. And I don't think there's any right or wrong. I think for me, my heart aches for her that she felt that's the only way that she could be successful. And I think we see so many examples, right? So like we see Monique, who runs Mael Organics, right? Face of her company doing well. We see someone like Super Scent, right? Or Karen Crayon Case, who is authentically who she is.
100%.
She hasn't changed nothing about herself, right? Her, Jessica Dupart with, Kaleidoscope, again, didn't change anything about, and they give back to communities and they're multi-millionaires. And so I think it's about finding what works for you. And then I think that's when the community will rally around. And here's the thing. I am under the impression that I don't inherently believe that white people as a whole are racist in 2023, right? Now we still got some racist folks. Like, very clear about that.
Yes, and we are in Georgia, y'all. So
they everywhere, even in very liberal states and cities. But as a whole, I don't think that them as individuals are racist. I think we still live in a very systemic and institutionalized racist society. And I think in a way, there are a lot of folks who are not as beautifully melanated as we are, who make it a very intentional decision to patronize Black-owned and people of color businesses as maybe their own little private protest against family members or whatnot. And there's many more of them who don't care if you're Black or white. They just care about a great product. And then we will rally behind, right? And so I think that there is now some room for us to show up authentically who we are. And so I always find that sometimes we still like dance on the line. Well, I don't want to say anything that's going to offend. Like, I get it. They know I'm Black, Black owned business, proud to be Black. But then when things come up that require us to take a stand, it's like, oh, well, no, my business can't say anything about that because I may offend my consumer. And my question is always like, but they know you Black, right? Like, why would you not have an opinion about something that impacts your culture and your community? Why do you feel as though you can't speak up or support or give a donation or invest in something that's going to support your people if they know that that's your people? Like, so I always wonder, like, where's the balance for us? Like, how Black can we be?
I think all of us have our own journeys, right? Like talking about that lady who doesn't feel like she can show her face, and her her thesis or her hypothesis is being validated because she's making money from it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas to me, my hypothesis is being validated because I'm living in it, right? But for me, I've always been offensive. And so I am offensive to everyone. I'm offensive, whether you are brown, black, white, whatever you are, I am offensive, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, right? You cannot put me in this box and then be surprised that I want to poke the holes in it and get out, right? Like it's not fair. And to go to what you're saying about racism, and the structures are still there, right? And there's this guy who was on a British show talking about like white psychosis, and how white psychosis isn't necessarily that you are white and racist, but like how all of us plug in to the systems that colonialism, slavery, all of these things built, right? It's as simple as like, oh my God, you're going into the office with your hair like that? Going to wear your hair like that? Like this is the hair that grows out my head. You know what I mean?
Just like this. It grows in a triangle, y'all. That's what it does, okay? Like, I can't do nothing about it. And some days, I'm like, oh, well, let me put a bun so that it's not as obvious to other people. And then other days, like, look, you don't get it. And because I was interviewing you, it's like, at least let me, brush it down some. But there are days where you don't get all this wild glory. And you either like it or don't.
Right, exactly. And it's like white psychosis doesn't just fall on us because we're Black, right? People usually see us at people usually see Black people as the receiving end of racism. But like when you think about how it plays a role in community, it's like I've seen white girls straighten their hair till it falls out because they have to look a certain way also in these systems, right? Yeah. And it's just like enforcing these structures on everyone. But it really, really sucks for us as Black women. And, us being sort of like the patrons of our culture and the patrons of our communities, right? We bear such a heavy weight in that space of being at the receiving end of racism, structure, societies, white psychosis and all of that.
Yeah.
That's why they don't want us to wear our hair and our braids, our triangles, our fros. I was like, that shouldn't be a problem to you. They're mad when you're happy that you're Black. They mad when you speak about like, why are so many of us dying in these hospitals? Like, you know what I mean? They're mad when we say no one believes us when we have pain. They want us to communicate to them a certain way, but they also don't want to let us into their schools. And that's like going back to what's happening with this particular organization. Is just going back to like, you don't want to hand us the fish. You don't want to let us in the room to give us a fish.
Right.
You told us, get out, go fish.
Well, we did that, and now it's a problem.
Now we got a problem. Now something's wrong with us. I guess we're supposed to fish, but bring the stuff back to y'all. So y'all can then spend our money on people that don't look like us.
It's a vicious cycle, and someone has to be the one to break it, right? What would you say is a responsibility that Black-owned businesses have to community, to young people? And it doesn't have to be two separate answers, either one. But the idea that as community, we're asked to support Black businesses. Is there a responsibility that Black businesses have to community?
That's a great question. Because again, like I walk on the thing of authenticity, right? And so like going back to the lady that you were talking about, she doesn't feel like she has to be the face of it and all of that. For me personally, I think so. I think like when you see a lot of Black women owned businesses, by nature, there isn't a community aspect, right? Like you're doing what you're doing for a community of Black youth. I'm doing what I'm doing for a community of Black women, entrepreneurs. People are doing things for Black businesses. People are doing things to give so that kids can have access to Wi-Fi. You know what I mean? And it's just like inherently when we build out these things, there's always an aspect of community. There's always someone who's like, man, I didn't have this as a kid and I want these kids to have it. And it's almost like inherent to our business.
Yeah.
I know some people don't feel like they have to do that, don't know what paths they've walked in life to feel like they don't have to do it, but it's very important. And I honestly, looking past just the being Black, I think if you are a business in this world and you profit from tax cuts and all of those things, get you some good karma and do right in the community,
Let me put that on a t-shirt. Get you have a QR code. Go Black business here. I love it.
Just give me my 20% cut and we get
I'm about to say, if somebody takes the idea, look, and make a donation to Hay. That's all I'm saying. It reminded me of something just silly. And I see it still in like cities that aren't as like fast-paced as Atlanta's and Chicago's and Detroit's and New York, but like just smaller towns, when we're talking about businesses and community and responsibility. I know we hated it, but I miss like all day in the salon, rallying around each other. And some of these women were VPs in their businesses, corporations, going to work in tailored suits. But here's the day where they could dress down. They're coming to the salon. They're able to connect with their sister friends and laugh and joke and gossip and whatever the hot topic was. But it was like this camaraderie, right? It was this gathering place, just like for men in the barbershop. And I see men do that more now. Women want the private salon loft, experiences and, come to my house or let me come to yours. And I don't have more than 45 minutes. Get me in, get me out. And I sometimes think the desire to not want to slow down hinders us, right? So I mean, it's not really a question about salons and do we need to go back waiting all day for an hour, 15 minutes service.
For your person.
Right. It's like if we lose something when we feel like we always have to be moving. Everything has to be just for us. Like I can't sit and let my sister get beautiful before me. It's like what happened? Does it impact our community that we don't slow down anymore? That we don't take the time to check in on one another in very organic and authentic ways, and then be excited when we're going to see members of that community like clockwork. I grew up knowing I was going to the salon every Saturday morning at 9 a.m.
Okay.
And I may not have gotten out till 3 o'clock. But even with that, I mean, what was a lot of my aunts and my mama and my cousins. So
everybody was in there.
But right. And somebody was at the wash bowl, somebody was in the chair, somebody was under the dryer, people walking around, showing pictures of their kids, if they had started a new business, girls getting ready for prom, helping them decide which of the two dresses that they're going to wear. Like it was this pouring into each other that we received. And so, some days you didn't want to sit there that long, but other days, like it was the best time in the world because you left feeling rejuvenated. And again, we don't have to recreate that at the hair salon, but where do we create that kind of camaraderie? I don't have to, it wasn't a situation where I had to call my homegirl and say, yo, do you have time to meet me for lunch? I knew I was going to see her Saturday, 9 a.m. at the hair salon. Like, do we have something like that where I don't have to worry about scheduling
time with you? Can I get 15 minutes?
Right. It's just like where we know to show up.
That is also another you were asking questions that have like 17 things that can be addressed. And I think it's interesting the name of your podcast, because I was having a conversation with one of my clients and around her programming and like just her essence. And I was just like, when I'm talking to you, I feel like I'm coming home, right? And I know other people feel probably different things that make them plug in. And so like one of the things that I was saying is just like, I remember growing up in Brooklyn and just like after being a kid that like got on the train to go into the city to school and come back, like just being able to see my stoop You know what I mean? It was just like, oh, oh,
I'm
oh,
almost there.
really?
I'm
I'm
home.
almost there.
Yeah.
I'm almost there to my safe space. And before, grew up in Brooklyn, and just like before things got a little too rough, it was always good to like walk past the old lady that knows you. Hey, how are you? We'll walk past the kids running around like crazy, walk past that one family that likes to sit on their stoop for way too long, just like those little things. And you're kind of checking in with people along the way. And and it's really like kind of like what you're saying, like this plug into community, this, but times have changed, things have moved past that, right? And it's like as we as a people start to like, I don't want to say expand, and I really hate doing this thing where it's like get higher or like measure things in these types of hierarchical, I hope I'm saying that correctly, ways. But it's like as we start to like push ourselves further into corporate spaces and making sure that we had master's degrees and making sure we had doctorates and making sure that we had all of these things and making sure we're pushing into these spaces where they don't necessarily want us to belong. We are pushing into things that are draining and draining and draining and draining and draining our energy even more. And then maybe corporate looked a little bit different back in the day where it was like, yes, you're here 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., whatever it was. But now corporate and work come home with you, right? And so the office phone doesn't stay at the office. The phone, yes, it travels with you. So not only have them people taxed you all day, you now at home and the emails are coming in and you're getting taxed that way. And so there isn't not at least one point where you actually have that quiet space for yourself. Once you have that quiet space for yourself Friday evening, and Saturday morning, you about to plug in with community authentically, right? There's no longer those separations for us. And so now I'm on the phone and gotta go get my hair, and I gotta make sure my daughter's hair is getting braided. And do you have time? I need her hair braided because she has soccer practice and she has this practice and she has that. And the kids are doing a million things, you doing a million things, the husband doing a million things, or your partner or whoever it is. And it's really not just like racial, it really is generational, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's like looking at all these kids who are like extremely stressed out. Like I had one extracurricular.
I tell people all the time, like these kids don't have nervous breakdowns by the time they're 25.
Yes.
And I remember leading a session for parents one day and was talking to them about the difference between having a high performing child and an overachiever. It's like your overachiever is going to burn out. Right. When you see certain kids, like, I don't know what happened. They were a straight A student. They did all the things. They were valedictorian. And then you look up 15, 20 years later and their life is in a shambles, right? 100%. Because they peaked too early. Like you force these kids to handle things that most adults who are stable and sensible can't handle. And their minds and their spirits can't handle it. I was like, so while I know you want to make sure the college application looks great, like your child doesn't need to play 4 different sports,
Oh my
be
gosh.
president of 6 different clubs,
Right.
and volunteer at church and at the hospital and keep a 4.0. And it's impossible versus you like sports, pick one. You don't have to play every season.
Right.
If sport you like is a fall, then you play in the fall. If the sport you like is a spring sport, then you play in the spring. And then maybe there's something artistic they can do in the off season. Like schedule their lives around things that will provide them balance, of course.
Yes.
But this idea that every minute has to be filled with something and they have to be the leader of the thing that they're doing and the star of what they're doing, that is not what's going to make them successful people. And I appreciate you even mentioning that it is a generational thing. And I don't know where the switch happened and why we felt like that had to be, but I was just home in Virginia Beach this last weekend. And I grew up in the type of neighborhood where everybody knows each other. Most of us are distant family members, distant cousins, that kind of thing. But I was walking home because our family church is like literally at the end of the block.
Oh,
And so
wow.
my mom was doing something. I was like, well, it's fine. I'll just walk home.
Mhm.
And I'm walking. I don't think I passed the first house next
Mhm.
to the church
Mhm.
where Miss Josephine and Mr. Dan was like, well, jump in the truck. We'll take you.
Right, right,
Right. But
right.
before I could get in the truck, two
Mhm.
other people were waving to me three houses down because they saw me coming and were
Mhm.
already trying to have a conversation with me,
Mhm.
right? Yelling down the street. Or as
Mhm.
we're driving, we stop in every couple of houses
Right.
because somebody's literally on
By
the side of the street,
by
right?
that time, you could have walked.
You gotta wave and you gotta speak and you
Mhm.
drive slow because people still sitting on their porches, especially when the weather is nice. And it's
Mhm.
like I miss that. And I know, well, with the exception of the gentrifiers who moved in the last 10 years, I know everybody's name.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know that's cousin Mickey's house. And that
Mhm.
was cousin Bay Boy's house.
Mhm.
Right. And that's where Charlene and Pam and Allison grew up. Right.
Mhm.
And that's Redman's house. And that's
Mhm.
where Noli lived. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's
Mhm.
where Uncle Jerome was. And that's where Miss Ames was. And that's where Aunt True's house was. Like,
Mhm. 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 Yep.
but we don't get that anymore. Like,
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. I
even
mean,
for those of us who live in the suburbs in these cities, like we
yeah.
go in the house, we close our garage doors, we shut the front door, and we don't
Mhm.
see our neighbors.
Right, right. There was when things were like that, it was easier to call on community, right? You didn't have to put out an RFP for it. You didn't have to join a club for it. You could easily say, hey, man needs this, or he's starting school, and people go, oh, we have the old uniforms. Oh, you just need to hem it up for her. She's a little short, or you know what I mean? Like all of those things, all of those resources mostly could be found there because of that thing of community. But to me, I would say it started with, you know, the ability for us to take the phones home. You
Yeah.
know, people believe that if you have this, then I have access to you, right? Like we had to come up with work-life balance. I'm sure the generations before us are like,
What's that? Why did
what do
like I
you
don't understand those things. Like, what are you talking about? Like my
right?
mom calls and like some meeting, she said, what do you I say I'm doing emails. Like, yeah, it's 8 o'clock. Well, I couldn't get to all of them today. And before they pile up tomorrow, kind of
Right,
thing. And
right,
it baffles her, like, what is work? 8 o'clock? What are
right,
you talking about?
right. And when you just think about how everything is gratifying to us now, like our
Mhm.
streaming platforms and back to like you at the salon. And I remember my like first hairdresser was like this older lady from South Carolina in Brooklyn. A lot of people came up from the South because they like the fast life.
Oh yeah, my family's from South Carolina, but I had four aunts and three of my aunts lived in Brooklyn.
In
Actually,
Brooklyn.
like a couple of them near Fort Greene. Had
Mm-hmm.
family in Brooklyn, a couple of uncles too, but yeah, they came up from Charleston.
Right. And so that was my first hairdresser. And her show was Wheel of Fortune. And so was at the hairdresser. I'm like, what am I, 11? What am I doing watching Wheel of Fortune? Right. But we were a generation of people that had to wait for when we wanted to see something. We had to wait for when we wanted to eat something. We had to wait.
DVR, you can
Mhm.
record it, come back.
Yes, yes. It was never like things automatically just popping up in front of us. All we had to do is wait 20 minutes. And
No.
so it's it may feel like a bigger strain on us because we are a community that is believed to be strapped for resources as it is. And so when you alter the formula that works for us and that has been working for us, being very community focused,
Yeah.
there is a big shift to it. Whereas other groups can go out into the suburbs, their formulas work for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's very true. That's
Mhm.
very true. Goodness. Well, Ayanna, thank you. Before we end, tell folks a little bit more about what your project board does. I know you kind of gave us a highlight, but if
Mhm.
someone was interested in inquiring about your services, what does that look like? And then for sure, let people know how they can find you.
Oh, all of these great questions. And that's why we're in our cohort. So I spoke earlier about how your project board sort of like kind of plugs in and tries to like fix the holes and stuff like that. But we really are big on making sure the Black women impact missions and businesses and organizations thrive. And so we kind of come in and we build like a little nest around you, our little birdie, you know what I mean? To create these things for you to grow. So we will focus in on stuff like social media marketing. One of the biggest things that I tell my clients right now is share your story, share your story. So I'm always telling them, you know, always share the vision, share the services, talk about how you got here over and over again. And so we help them craft those messaging, post it and all of that. We also help our clients put together programming. So for example, we have clients who focus on coaching, small business coaching, and coaching Black women who are in corporate spaces. And we just also treat our little babies with all the love and care and tough love that they need.
I love it. We need it for sure.
Thank you.
How can they find you? Website, social media?
You guys go ahead and follow me. No, I'm just kidding. Right now, please go ahead and go to the linktree/your project board, with board spelled BRD. Our actual website is being revamped right now, so you can't go to the URL and find us. But if you go to our Linktree, you should be able to do that. And we are on social as Your Project Board, BRD spelled BRD.
Love it. And all of her information is going to be in the captions and in the descriptions. So in case you didn't get a chance to catch it or wanted to make sure you had everything spelled correctly, no worries. We will have it all there for you to make it super easy and efficient for you. Ayanna, thank you again for your time tonight and for joining us on the front porch.
Thank you. It was good to be here. This is one of my favorite parts of the house, you know.
All good stuff. Love it. Thank you all. Be sure to share with everyone that you know, and we'll see you next time.